In this video, I would like to deal with the problem of whether Allah and Yahweh are the same God. To remind you, Allah is the God of Islam and Muslims, whereas Yahweh is the God of Judaism and Christianity. However, it needs to be mentioned that the Jews are still waiting for the first coming of the Messiah, whereas for Christians, he already came some 2000 years ago. Christians are only waiting for the second coming of the Messiah. From the comparison of the Bible and the Quran, it clearly results that Allah and Yahweh are not the same God. This is confirmed by Allah himself, who in Surah 109 reveals to his messenger Muhammad, "Say, O infidels, I do not worship what you worship, and you are not worshippers of what I worship, and I am not a worshipper of what you worship, and you are not worshippers of what I worship. For you is your religion, and for me is my religion." By the way, I'm using my own translation of the Quran from the Arabic original, but you can compare it with the existing official English translations, but preferably compare it with the Arabic original, to be on a safer side. Further, in Surah 5, verse 52, we read, "O you who have believed, do not take the Jews and the Christians as allies. They are allies for one another, and whoever of you takes them as allies, then indeed he is one of them. Indeed, Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people." Why are Jews and Christians allies for one another? Well, because they worship Yahweh and not Allah. What is also interesting is that the name of Yahweh is not amongst the 99 names or rather attributes of Allah. In order to further understand that Allah and Yahweh are not the same God, that we do not worship the same God, it is worth considering the idea, the problem of permanence and eternity of God's covenants and commandments. We learn from the Bible that God's commandments and covenants are eternal. For example, God made an eternal covenant with Noah, with Abraham, Moses, and finally with Jesus. The permanence and eternity of God's commandments is confirmed by the Quran. For example, in Surah 50, verse 29, Allah reveals to Muhammad, "My word does not change at me, and I do not wrong my servants." Surah 2, verse 80, "Say, did you take a covenant with God? Indeed, God never breaks his covenant." Surah 33, verse 62, "Such was the way of God with those who passed on before, and you will not find any change in the way of God." Surah 13, verse 25, "And those who break the covenant of God after they took it, they sever what God ordered to be joined, and spread corruption on earth. For them is the curse and evil home." One of such permanent and eternal covenants is the one from Mount Sinai, where the Decalogue was revealed to Moses. There are many verses in the Quran that refer to this event. For example, in Surah 2:63 we read, "And behold, we took a covenant with you, and we raised above you Sinai. Hold firmly what we gave to you, and remember what there is in it, and that you are God-fearing." In Surah 7, verses 144-45, we read, "He said, O Moses, indeed I have chosen you over the people for my messages and words. So take what I gave you and be of the grateful ones. We wrote for him on the tablets everything, instructions and explanations for everything. So hold them firmly and command your people to hold fast what is best in them." So the tablets are revealed to Moses, and they contained the Decalogue. The text of the Decalogue does not, however, appear in the Quran, but we know it is, it's about the tablets are about the Decalogue. The Decalogue appears in the Bible, in the chapter of Exodus and Deuteronomy. Further, in the Quran, in Surah 21, verse 48, we read, "Indeed, we already gave to Moses and Aaron the criterion," in the Arabic word for the criterion is Furqan, "and light and admonition for their God-fearing." These Quranic verses can be associated with the following biblical verses, namely they come from chapter of Deuteronomy. I will quote King James Bible here. In chapter 29, Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 9, we read, "Keep therefore the words of this covenant, and do them, that ye may prosper in all that ye do." In chapter 30, verse 15, we read, "See, I have set before thee this day life and good, and death and evil." Then in chapter 5, verses 32-33, "Ye shall observe to do therefore as the Lord your God hath commanded you. Ye shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left. Ye shall walk in all the ways which the Lord your God hath commanded you, that ye may live, and that it may be well with you, and that ye may prolong your days in the land which ye shall possess." Although Allah, so we can say that so far, so good, that Allah and Yahweh do not differ in this respect, right? So their covenants and the commandments are eternal, right? And both talk about Sinai, about the tablets, about the Decalogue, right? However, the problem is that Allah decides to depart from the earlier law and books, and he decides to reform the earlier law and go back to the times of Abraham, who lived some 1800 BC, that is to say, long before Moses, who lived 1400 BC, and so long before also Sinai, where the Decalogue was revealed, right? So Allah moves back to the times of Abraham, when there was no law yet. So the Quranic verses that testify to the fact that Allah reforms the law are the following. In 22:78 we read in the Quran, "And strive in God by the truth of his striving. He has chosen you and has made no inconvenience for you in this religion. It was the religion of your father Abraham. He called you Muslims before that, and in this, so that the messenger would be a witness over you, and that you might be witnesses over people. So establish a prayer, give zakat, and stick to God. He is your protector. He is a perfect protector." Then in Surah, the only commandments here are establishing the prayer, giving zakat, and sticking to God, to Allah. Then in Surah 49:7 we read, "And know that there is God's messenger among you," that is to say Muhammad. "If he had listened to you in many details of this matter, you would certainly suffer, but God has made your faith more pleasant and embellished it in your hearts, and has made hateful to you disbelief, wickedness, and disobedience. These are the righteous ones." In Surah 5:3 we read, "Today I have perfected your religion for you and fulfilled my grace over you. I have approved Islam as a religion for you." Islam is being submitted to Allah. Islam means submission, whereas Muslim means the one who is submitted to Allah. In 3:19 we read, "Indeed, the religion of God is Islam." In 3:67 we read, "Abraham was not a Jew or a Christian, but he was an honest Muslim, and he was not an idolater." Although Allah claims that Abraham was a Muslim, there is some inconsistency in the Quran in this respect, because for example in Surah 6 verse 14 he reveals to Muhammad, "Say, indeed I was commanded to be the first who submitted." and not to be an idolater. Then in Surah 39 verse 12, Muhammad says, Allah reveals to Muhammad to say, "And I was commanded to be the first of the Muslims." Muslims, that is to say, submitted ones. So from this we learn that Muhammad was the first Muslim. So Abraham could not have been a Muslim. Of course, Abraham was also submitted to God, but to Yahweh, and certainly not in the sense of Islam. The reform of the earlier Decalogue, of the earlier law, of the first law given to humanity by God, is confirmed by footnote number 38 in Ali Unal's translation. At the verse 157. So the footnote appears at verse 157. There we read as follows. I will skip some part of it. I will just stick to the relevant part one. So here the reform of Allah is Allah's reform of the earlier law and books is confirmed. We read here. Another point that is emphasized in this verse is that there were strict commandments in the Torah. The Torah is the Pentateuch of Moses, that were there due to the conditions of the time and the character of the children of Israel. These commandments are what the Quran describes as burdens and fetters. The Prophet Jesus, upon him be peace, modified and lightened some of them. And the reference to Surah 350 is given here, to the words of the Quranic Jesus. God's messenger, that is to say Muhammad, removed all of them. And it is for this reason that Islam is described as the pure, primordial religion, which is easy to follow. Well, why? Because God's messenger, or Allah, removed all of the commandments that were before. In the last verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, the believers are taught to pray, "Our Lord, lay not on us a burden such as you laid on those gone before us, as required by the education they had to receive according to the time and conditions and to their disposition." So we read in Unal's translation of the Quran. First thing, Jesus, the biblical Jesus, certainly did not come to modify the earlier law. And this can be proved by what we read in the Bible, namely in Matthew 5, verses 17-19. Jesus says there, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven." An example of Allah's reform of the earlier law, namely of the earlier Decalogue revealed on Sinai, is the following. So in the Decalogue, the fifth commandment goes as follows: "Thou shalt not kill." As regards the gospel, Jesus goes one step further. He goes above the Decalogue. So in Matthew 5, chapter 5, verses 21-22, we read, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment." So Jesus, the biblical Jesus, the gospel Jesus, goes above the Decalogue. So he does not abolish the Decalogue. His teachings include the Decalogue, but he goes above it. However, in the Quran, we read, for example, in Surah 9, verse 111, Allah reveals, "Indeed, God has bought from believers their souls and their possessions. Indeed, for them is paradise. They fight in the way of God, they kill and they are killed." I think this is enough. to illustrate Allah's reform. There are also other departures from the Decalogue in the Quran, but this deserves another video. With respect to the fifth commandment, it's interesting to read what St. James says in one of his letters. In 2 verses 10-11, we read, "For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now, if you commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law." So in this respect, in the respect of killing, we can say in the light of this, that Allah is a transgressor of the earlier law. The Gospel and the Quran go in two opposing, we can say, directions with respect to the Decalogue. They are on two opposite sides. The Gospel goes above the Decalogue and the Quran goes below the Decalogue. Well, there is a very powerful sign, a very powerful symbol in the holy days of the week, which illustrates what happened to the law in the Quran. Saturday is the holy day for Jews, in Judaism. And Saturday, we can assume that it symbolizes the first book, the Old Testament. It also symbolizes the Decalogue, also Moses, Sinai, etc. It was revealed as first, right? Later on comes the Gospel, right, as the second revelation. So we move further in time and we move to Sunday. So because the holy day of for Christians is Sunday, and Sunday is the day of the sun, and Sunday symbolizes the Gospel. It symbolizes the new commandment of love given by Jesus. It also symbolizes other teachings of Jesus, but the new commandment of love is actually the biggest commandment, and it comprises the Decalogue. And is not restricted to it, right? So it includes the Decalogue and goes above it. It also, for example, the new commandment of love commands you to love your enemies, right, and your persecutors. Which is very demanding, the most demanding commandment ever given to people by God. And the third revelation, we can say, is the Quran. So we should move to moving further in time, we move to Monday, right? So Monday would symbolize the third revelation, the Quran. Monday is the day of the moon, and the holy day of Muslims should be Monday, right? Because Monday is next after Sunday. We move forward in time. Right, and the Quran is the third, we can say, revelation, right? Although from a different source. So why Monday should be the holy day for Muslims? Yes, because Monday is the day of the moon, and the moon is the symbol of Islam. Moreover, Muhammad was born on Monday and he died on Monday. What is more, he received his first revelation on Monday. So Monday should be the holy day for Muslims. However, Allah decides to move to Friday. For example, in Surah 6:29, we read, "When is called for the prayer on Friday, then proceed to the remembrance of God and leave trade," etc. So Allah chooses Friday as the holy day for Muslims, for Islam. This movement, this movement which is backward in time, symbolizes the movement to the times of Abraham, to the times when there was no law yet revealed. I mean the law on Mount Sinai, the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments. So he moves to Friday, and Friday is before Saturday. So before the Decalogue, right? So Abraham did not have the commandments yet. It was Moses who received the commandments, I mean the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue, for the first time. And this is confirmed by the Bible and the Quran. this movement is a very powerful symbol. So Moses lived long after Abraham, some 400 years after, right? So Friday symbolizes the Quran, symbolizes no Decalogue, right, and symbolizes perhaps Abraham when there was no law yet. All right, so this is a very powerful symbol which is worth mentioning in the discussions about God, in the discussions between Christians and Muslims. To finish, I would like to read a few conclusions, namely, 1. As we can see from the above discussion, we cannot talk of one and the same God because Allah broke away from the covenant of Sinai, which for Yahweh is eternal and permanent and is still in force until today. Yahweh by his Son went even further and raised the level of moral requirements for people, whereas Allah lowered the level of these requirements by going to the times of Abraham when there was no law yet. Therefore, in the case of the Bible and the Quran, we cannot talk of one and the same source of revelation, as in many respects they seem to be revealed from opposing sources. The Gospel and the Quran go into opposing directions with respect to the Decalogue. 2. If Yahweh were the same God as Allah, then both the Jews and the Christians unconditionally would have to become Muslims. But except for isolated cases, this can never happen, bearing in mind the above argumentation. So it is understandable why it is rather Muslims who identify Yahweh with Allah, but Christians are reluctant to do so. 3. On the other hand, if Allah were the same God as Yahweh, he would not have departed from the earlier law and books, because they are eternal and still in force. 4. Since Allah confirms the covenant of Sinai, then he at the same time confirms that the earlier books were different from the Quran, and thus not all revelations starting from Adam and ending with Muhammad were exactly the same, as it is held in Muslim tradition. Moses was the first one to receive the tablets with the Decalogue, from which Allah decides to depart, which means his covenants are not eternal, although he says they are. So in this case, he cannot be Yahweh, whose covenants and commandments are eternal and permanent and are still in force until today. To finish, the separation of Allah from Yahweh solves many problems. For example, the problem of whether God begot a son or not. It is, begetting the son by God makes sense only in the Bible. It doesn't make sense in the Quran. So, Yahweh begot a son and Allah did not beget a son. He did not need him. But this matter deserves another video because it's an interesting one. Right, so thank you for your attention and goodbye.